Senator McInnes, on debate.
Yes, thank you very much. Senators, thank you for this opportunity to speak to Bill C-45 at second reading, the so-called Cannabis Act, an act respecting cannabis, and to amend the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, the Criminal Code, and other acts. When we were on our break in January, I took a day or two to do some research into this bill, and I drafted this speech back then. I hope it's still relevant, and I hope it's not repetitive. Although at this hour it's hard for it, with all the speeches in advance, it's hard not to be repetitive. In summary, the bill proposes to regulate and legalize the production, possession, use, and distribution of marijuana throughout Canada. The Prime Minister announced his intention more than 2 years ago to legalize the use of marijuana in Canada. In fact, as I recall, it was a plank in the Liberal platform, and as the Prime Minister put it, those who smoke marijuana illegally on Parliament Hill on Canada Day will be doing so legally on Canada Day in 2018. Announcements such as this by any political party just prior to the commencement of an election campaign are often done for political gain, absent of any research into, in this instance, the many ramifications legalizing the use of marijuana. There were no discussions with the scientific community, the medical societies, doctors, law enforcement officials, provincial governments, justice officials, border control, not even the Department of Health officials. In theory, this bill's purpose is to protect the public health and the public safety of Canadians. The Government of Canada told us that they must rid Canada of the illicit sale of some $7 billion in drugs by the criminals. In particular, the government was very concerned about the sale of drugs to those young persons under the age of 18 because of the repercussions and damage to brain development. So here we are, just 5 months from the time it will be legal to purchase and consume marijuana, predicated on the protection of public health and safety. Now, forgive me, but I have some concerns and questions along with, I might add, many other Canadians. How is it in the public's interest to, one, permit young persons ages 12 to 18 to have on their person 5 grams or, what I'm told, equivalent to 8 to 10 joints of marijuana? 2, consumption of a drug that the medical community state is injurious to the brain for Canadians 25 years of age or younger. It has been linked to paranoia, schizophrenia, psychosis, anxiety, and fatalities. 3, how is it in the public interest to legalize the growth of 4 cannabis plants in each residence in the presence of children and vulnerable animals? Search warrants for peace officers will be complex and expensive if they wish to inspect. 4, how will the presence in the home of edibles such as brownies, cookies, and candy, where children or even guests can have access, be in the interest of Canadians? 5, how is it reasonable and safe to proceed with this law when there exists such concern from the medical community, scientists, law enforcement, insurance companies, firefighters, and others? 6, driving while high presents a serious public safety hazard, and law enforcement have neither the equipment nor knowledge to sustain the onslaught of impaired drivers. Some of you may have viewed recently the Fifth Estate program entitled Driving While High. Through some fairly exhaustive investigative work, with the evidence from a number of professional experts along with a number of victims who were falsely accused, it was clearly determined the testing is not reliable in the United States. That same field sobriety test is being used here in Canada, and the government has allocated $80 million, or approximately that, for training of police officers. In the United States, there is a class action underway, and the courts do not rely on these tests any longer in many states. Mad Canada do not agree with this testing method at all. Currently, there is little or no accurate enforcement of drug-induced impairments in Canada. 7, retail outlets will be expected to be located throughout all parts of Canada, and analogous to the sale of liquor. I suggest that this access will increase, not decrease, the consumption of drugs. 8, the salespersons in these outlets require extensive training on all aspects of the various strains of these drugs. This will become a massive training exercise by the provinces, who to this point have no network in place. 9, the government keeps telling us that one key reason for legalizing the sale and possession of marijuana is to eliminate the underground or put the criminal elements out of business. Now, the very notion that the Hells Angels and Satan's Choice will be compelled to find some other field to fill the void left because government has taken over their market is quite frankly wrong and unsubstantiated. In fact, I unhappily predict that the market will expand as Canadians will be intrigued and lured by friends, retailers, and others to try it. It will, after all, be there in your hometown with the sign, "Open for Business." Further, because the Nova Scotia government has announced that 9 sites where cannabis will be sold will allow criminal element to continue further throughout the remainder of the province. Only a few places that they're putting it, and that's an example of what that province is doing. These are the concerns that I have, and they are real and most certainly will prove to be injurious to the health and safety of Canadians. Now, honourable senators, and I've heard this said a number of times today, why the rush? What is the panic? Consider a couple of options. First, the status quo, coupled with a vigorous plan of prevention and education embedded with an intense program of healthy choice. Do this for the next 2 years. I realize the government has $40 million for such a program, but no one seems to know if it has even hit the drawing board. This prevention and education is the route Sweden has taken, and I read that they have the lowest drug consumption in the world. A second alternative would be to delay or amend the proclamation clause by inserting the coming into force on September 1st, 2019, following an intense preventative program. I say September 1st, 2019, because the government will wish to show they follow through on their campaign commitment, like any other government would do. In reality, it should be proclaimed on September 1st, 2020. That would be the best alternative. Clearly, the provinces and police forces and many other agencies are simply not ready. In addition, there is considerable evidence which concludes that for an effective preventative plan to work, it should be in place for at least 2 to 3 years in advance of a drug being legalized. Now, Senators, concentration on the harmful effects of marijuana to the health of our young persons, the dangers of driving while high, fatalities due to impaired driving, all would be much more productive in reducing the use of cannabis than this attempt to shut down the illicit drug market. To proceed with C-45 could lead to what we see in Colorado, 5 years into legalization. An article published in the Colorado Gazette highlights Colorado now has the highest level of homelessness in the United States. Twice as many accidents involving drivers under the influence of marijuana. A 71% increase in illegal consumption in schools. And Colorado ranks first in the United States for marijuana use among teens, scoring well above the national average. Finally, the Nova Scotia Chronicle-Herald, just the other week here, had a full-page article on why employers should prepare for marijuana legalization in the workplace. I have not been able to find any literature on planning or messaging to the businesses and government communities workplace and the issues the employers will have to deal with. What are the considerations here? And I'm paraphrasing as to what was in the article. Workplace assessment, which considers safety-sensitive nature of work, such as a pilot, extent of marijuana consumption, if judgment and insight are required on the job, what is the worker's ability, extent of supervision of workers. 2, every employer must have a workplace-tailored drug and alcohol policy that demands employees attend ready and able to engage in productive and safe work. This probably will require a testing regime. 3, complex human performance can be impaired for more than 24 hours. THC impairs psychomotor skills and judgment allegedly for 24 hours. Unions and employees believe that employers cannot prohibit off-duty consumption. 4, testing must have reasonable cause to believe employees are impaired. You just can't order an employee to be tested. Testing could be challenged on reasonable cause for testing. Senators, this presents a real dilemma, and who has laid out a plan of action for employers, unions, or employees? No one, that's who. It is for all these reasons that I have identified as to why I strongly am of the belief that we cannot and should not approve this piece of legislation, at least at this time. Not only is this legislation contrary to the public health and safety of Canadians, governments, NGOs, employers, and unions, Canadians are simply uninformed and not ready for the very serious repercussions of this bill. For these reasons, as the bill is currently drafted, I cannot support it. Thank you.
Senator Bernard.
Honourable Senators, I ask for leave of the Senate to revert to the notices of motion.
I'm sorry, Senator Bernard. I thought you were going to ask a question of Senator McInnes. We have to deal with the adjournment first. Senator Duffy, a question?
Yes, Speaker, question for Senator McInnes. In your previous life, Senator, you were, I believe, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General in Nova Scotia. What is your understanding of the preparedness or the state of preparedness of the police forces in your province to deal with this proposed legislation?
Senator McInnes.
I haven't spoken with them directly, but what I read, and you being the next media person, you know that if you read it in the media, it's probably true. But what I understand that they're actually, and in fact the provinces and most entities that will have anything to do with this are simply not prepared. This is something probably they should have been when this was announced as a plank in the platform of the government, which was fair ball, and the people of Canada elected them. But actually, nothing really had happened. And so the legislation comes forward. It's now coming through. It undoubtedly will pass, probably with some amendments. But there was no preparatory work, or to my knowledge, it wasn't until the provinces were pulled up here in Ottawa and they determined how they were going to split the cash. But there was no preparatory work in planning this. I mean, I know personally some police officers who are troubled by this. They're not ready. Even firefighters, a number of entities, doctors that they didn't even discuss it with the health officials. So this is still evolving, and that's why in my speech I mentioned we should take the time to do a preventative, an education program that could take place over the next year or 2 years. And if that were the case, we can proclaim it a year, 2 years down the road, that it will come into force. Everyone in Canada will know it's coming, so let's all get prepared and have the time to do so. But it's a very good question, and they're simply not ready.
Senator Martin.
Adjournment to the debate.
Moved by the Honourable Senator Martin, seconded by the Honourable Senator Smith, that further debate be adjourned until the next sitting of the Senate. It's your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion.